Well, it's a pleasure now to discuss some approved and emerging devices for the treatment of heart failure. We'll start with cardiac contractility modulation therapy, and I'm often asked, what is CCM? Well, CCM is an electrical signal applied to the heart during the absolute refractory period of the cardiac cycle. It is delivered via an implantable pulse generator. Its signals affect the biology of the failing myocardium in a way that increases contractility with no increase in myocardial oxygen consumption or work, so that the overall efficiency of the heart as a pump is improved. These effects have been studied in a series of 4 randomized studies, which showed significant impact of CCM on exercise tolerance, quality of life, and functional status. And in particular, the Hfpef study demonstrated a particularly strong responder subgroup with ejection fractions ranging from 25 to 45%. And that subgroup was then subsequently tested in the confirmatory Hfpef trial. The results of that trial demonstrated a nearly 1 ml per kilogram per minute improvement in peak VO2, reflective of a clinically meaningful improvement in exercise ability, and also showed very large and clinically meaningful improvements in quality of life, as shown on the left-hand figure on this slide, and in the proportion of patients experiencing at least a 1-class improvement in the New York Heart Association functional class ranking. In addition, in a pre-specified subgroup analysis of the Hfpef trial, we demonstrated that cardiac contractility modulation improved these parameters of exercise capacity, quality of life, and functional status in both Hfref as well as in Hfmref patients. So on the basis of these and other data, on March 21st, 2019, the US FDA approved the Optimizer Smart System for the delivery of cardiac contractility modulation for class 3 heart failure patients who remain symptomatic despite guideline-directed medical therapy, who are in normal sinus rhythm, not indicated for CRT, and have an LV ejection fraction ranging from 25 to 45%. And more recently, in October of last year, the FDA authorized the removal of the requirement for normal sinus rhythm from these indications for use on the basis of new data demonstrating the effectiveness of CCM in patients with atrial fibrillation. Now, the next of the approved devices that I'd like to review with you is a system for pulmonary artery pressure monitoring, the CardioMEMS HF system. The components of that system are shown here, and I'll point you to the upper right-hand figure on this slide or picture, which shows the MEMS-based pressure sensor, which is implanted in a branch of a pulmonary artery to provide the information shown on the lower right-hand side of this slide, these continuous day-to-day measurements of pulmonary artery pressures. And then those pressures can be used for patient management, and this approach was studied in the pivotal CHAMPION trial. This is a very busy slide. Suffice it to say that we enrolled 550 patients, regardless of their LV ejection fraction, Hfpef, Hfref, Hfmref, everything in between, a randomized single-blind controlled study. And that study demonstrated the ability to use pulmonary artery pressure-guided heart failure care as a means to significantly reduce the risk of heart failure hospitalization, also resulting in reductions of the combined endpoint of death or heart failure hospitalization and all-cause hospitalizations, as well as the composite of death or all-cause hospitalizations alone. And these results were seen regardless of LV ejection fraction in both Hfref and in Hfpef patients. Now, more recently, these observations from CHAMPION were confirmed and expanded in the GUIDE-HF trial. The GUIDE-HF trial is summarized on this slide. This was a study of hemodynamically guided management of heart failure patients, and it demonstrated an improvement in clinical outcomes. Here, there was an expansion into class 2 and class 4 heart failure. There was also the use of biomarkers to determine eligibility in these patients. Patients were randomized to active management using the CardioMEMS heart failure system versus control. And there was also both a pre-COVID and during COVID analysis done in this trial. And to make a long story short, this trial demonstrated in the pre-specified pre-COVID endpoint analysis significant reductions in the primary endpoint of all-cause mortality, heart failure hospitalizations, or urgent heart failure visits, as well as heart failure hospitalizations alone, confirming but expanding the observations of the CHAMPION trial. And the CardioMEMS HF system was approved in May of 2014, as per the indication in the second bullet point. But now, excitingly, just in February of 2022, the FDA expanded this indication to include class 2 patients, as well as include patients on the basis of elevated BNP or NT-proBNP. And finally, I'll just briefly mention interatrial shunting in heart failure. This slide shows you how it works. It decompresses the left atrium by shunting blood from the left to the right side of the heart. There are many approaches to interatrial shunting under investigation. The current status of interatrial shunting is summarized on this slide. Suffice it to say that we are now in the important pivotal trial stage to better determine the safety and effectiveness of interatrial shunting for heart failure. Thank you so much for your attention.